stuff. So can we please have a massive round of applause for David Bramwell and Bavard.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to fend off the gender questions before they come. So this is a story which is largely about men from the past, but the villain of the story is a woman. And don't shoot the messenger, because I'm retelling a story that I came across recently, which gave me great joy. So the talk is called Masquerade, Paradoxical Tale of Deceit, Buried Treasure and Cowpats, and at the risk of a shameless plug, for the last 3 years I've been writing, or co-writing compendiums with a woman, for the publishing company Hare, and it's great because Joe and I get to sort of choose the subjects and choose what we research. And this story that I want to share with you was the favourite story of mine from our latest book, The Odyssey, which is about unusual journeys, and it's about the world's largest treasure hunt. And our story begins in the summer of 1976, and Kit Williams, the artist, and Banda Gascoigne from University Challenge get into Kit Williams' car in central London and drive to Ampthill Park in Bedfordshire. In the car they have a spade, a casket containing a golden hare valued at £5,000, and a fresh cowpat in a perspex box. They arrive at the park near midnight, and it's here the cross dedicated to Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII, that at a particular spot known only to Kit Williams, they begin to dig. They dig deep enough so that the casket can't be detected by metal detectors. They place the casket deep into the ground, replace the soil, and for good measure they slide the cowpat on top. So the field, the space is used by cows, and by putting the cowpat on top, no one's going to notice that the earth has been disturbed. And sorry, I said 1976, 1979. 1979 is when this happened. This was the culmination of 3 years hard graft by Kit Williams, and the casket containing the golden hare would remain buried for 2.5 years. So what was it all about? Those of you of a certain age in the audience will be familiar with this book. Hands up if you've never heard of Masquerade. Oh, that's pretty good. Hands up if you owned a copy of Masquerade. Hands up if you ever sold it. Right. I was a little boy in the late 70s, but I received a copy of Masquerade. It was a great Christmas present. In fact, I think the 60,000 copies that Jonathan Cade published that Christmas sold out within weeks. It went on to ship 2 million copies across the globe. Now, this book was devised as a treasure hunt for those who could decipher the codes and the puzzles and riddles within it to be able to work out where the golden hare was buried. But Kit Williams, who was a rising star in the art world in the early 70s, he was collected by people like Elton John. Kit Williams was approached by Jonathan Cade in 1976, and they said, "Would you do a kids' book?" And he went, "No, I don't want to do a kids' book. No, because it'll get looked at for 5 minutes and tossed onto a pile of other kids' books, and that'll be it. I want people to really study my art. If I'm going to make a book of art, I want people to really, really scrutinise it and enjoy it." And so he came up with an alternative idea. Why don't I create a book in which alludes to buried treasure, and to find the buried treasure people have to really study the detail of the pictures and maybe the words within it, and only after long and hard consideration and head scratching will people be able to work it out, and that way the art will be appreciated. Now, Kit's art, I don't think is dated very well. It would have looked great on maybe a Hawkwind album cover in 1975. Anyway, I mean that's not fair to say. So instead, this is what he devised, and so for 3 years he worked solidly on this. Not only that, he was a master of many different skills, and so he created the golden hare himself, and so this is what was buried inside the casket. So the book Masquerade itself tells the story of, it's a celestial love affair between the sun and the moon, and the sun asks a hare to take this precious ornament to the moon as a gift, and somewhere along the way, the Hare, who's a little absent-minded, loses the object, and your job as reader is to try and find out where it was dropped. And this is what some of the pages of the book would have looked like. Now, first of all, it needs to be said that Kit Williams was profoundly dyslexic, and so as an artist, he had no great intention of trying to actually put any of the clues in the text, in the story. So the story is a red herring. There is nothing within the story that gives any clues as to where the thing was buried. It's all in the art, actually. And here is some of the art. That is each bandit. So now Williams was optimistic that the book, if we read the final sentence, that the treasure is as likely to be found by a bright child of 10 with an understanding of language, simple mathematics and astronomy as it is to be found by an Oxford Don. Utter bollocks. The people who were finally the only people on the planet who ever solved the puzzle were astrophysicists. A child of 10 would have really struggled. And in fact, Bavard Gascoigne expressed his anxiety about this because he was the only person in on the secret. He knew where it was buried. Because he accompanied Williams as an honest person to keep that secret. So he knew where it was buried, and he knew a little bit about the background of the book, and he still couldn't figure out how the book could be solved. So he was anxious about this idea that anyone actually would be able to solve the problem. So what happened? So I was, how old was I? 10, 8, 9, something like that. When I was given a copy of the book, and like most of my friends, most people I know, we did actually what Williams didn't want us to do. We were just going to flick through it and go, I can't make head and tail of it, and then it went into a pile of discarded books. So most people were armchair sleuths in approaching this book. Most people would get it out now and again and scratch their heads and have a look at it, and I'll come back to it later. But there were also the dedicated masqueraders, as they became known, people who really, really wanted that £5,000 golden hare and would do anything, almost anything, to try and find it. Now, the first thing that both Jonathan Cape and Williams hadn't really thought about was that if you put a book out in the world which says there's some buried treasure somewhere, what people are going to do is go out with spades and start digging anywhere and everywhere. And within a few months, Williams was obliged to provide this sign, the bottom bit of this sign, for the National Trust area in Haresfield Beacon, which is close to where he lives, saying, look, it's not here, please stop digging it up. The National Trust are getting really pissed off about it. And even more so, private landowners got increasingly pissed off about people just turning up in the dead of night, and the next morning, lots of holes, broken fences. People did get arrested. The book bizarrely started to sell across the world. Now, I mean, not so bizarre in places like maybe Italy or France, in which the translations were relatively straightforward. If you Google the word confused Japanese, you don't get many images, so this is the best I could do. The Japanese, it's sold by the bucket load in Japan, but because of the differences in the language, the way it was translated meant that it could never be deciphered. The Japanese could not actually figure out where the hare was buried, even if they'd been able to solve the clues. But it didn't stop it. It's selling in tens, if not hundreds of thousands in Japan. Now, the Americans loved this book. The Americans were so excited at the idea of buried treasure in the UK. And so Laker Airlines set up unique package holidays in which you could fly over to the UK for 10 days, stay in a hotel in the centre of England, be given a hired car and a spade, and off we went out to dig up the English countryside. The Italians were so taken with Masquerade that they were the only country that made their own version of the book, and this is where the hare was buried underneath the foot of the statue at Montesoro al Mare. So there were the newspapers obviously loved this story, and they would report accounts of. I remember there was a Swiss gentleman who was air sea rescued from the side of a cliff in Cornwall looking for the hare. There were, as I say, many arrests, people breaking into, say, MOD areas that we were meant to go into. And a German who sold his home and moved over to the UK so he could look for the Hare full time. But there were three key people in the story of the Masqueraders, the ones who became truly obsessed with this book. There were three key people, which ties in very nicely with our previous talk. So the first person I just want to briefly talk about is Fred Hancock. Now, if you scour the internet, there are no images of Fred Hancock, so that's the best I could do. Now, Fred Hancock was an antique dealer from London, and he reputedly drove 50,000 miles in a brand new Audi, and basically wore the car out, which was worth more than the Hare that he was looking for. And he was obsessed with going to Plymouth, and he went to Plymouth 15 times to the statue of Sir Walter Raleigh, and he dug everywhere he could think of around the statue to try and find it, to no avail. Next, he became obsessed with all of the islands that exist in the Thames, and he dug in the epicentre of every single one of these islands, looking for the Hare to no avail, and this continued. So Hancock, like the German guy, became a full-time occupation for him. Richard Dale, for whom I could find no photographs on the internet, was one of the more tragic cases where he actually went loopy. He probably went loopy and became so obsessed with the search for the Hare that he kind of cracked. Now, Richard Dale believed that he had found the treasure. He was looking around in a building site and he found a ceramic plug which he thought had the initials KW on it, standing for Kipling. And so he contacted the press and said, "I've got it, found it." So the press all turned up at some hotel and he dug out this ceramic plug and said, "Look, it's got the initials KW." No one in the room could see those initials apart from Richard Dale, and the press drifted away. Dale thought, "Oh, I see what's going on here. Everybody's in on it. And I am the keeper of the jewel of Masquerade, and in fact it isn't the Hare, and I need to let Kit Williams know that I now know that I am, and that it's a global conspiracy." And he thought to himself, what's the best way to alert Kit Williams that I'm kind of in on the secret? And he thought, well, what I'll do is I'll translate the Sermon on the Mount onto a large roll of toilet paper and send that to Kit Williams, which is what he did. And the more he thought about it, he thought, well, actually, Williams couldn't have masterminded this. This is bonkers. It had to come from a higher power. It had to come from someone with one of the greatest brains on the planet. Must have masterminded this whole thing around me. And he figured that it had to have been Agatha Christie, right? Who died 3 years before the book came out. But that didn't matter because for Dale, she planned it all before she died, and she set the whole thing up for Williams to orchestrate on her behalf. Now, it needs saying at this point that Williams, because he rationalised that it wasn't really fair to sell the book in places like America or Japan and expect those people to pay for their own flights to come over to look for, as many did, to come over and look for the Hare. What he said was, "I don't mind if you write to me with suggestions, and if you get it right, I'll tell you and I'll pay for your flight." What that meant was he was getting about 250 letters a day, not only from people around the world, but people from the UK as well. And so there was one couple in America who just every day sent a letter to Kit Williams that just went, "Is it Ashby de la Zouche? No, is it Keswick?" And just with a map of England. Someone from Bristol anonymously sent him bits of his breakfast every morning. So Williams wasn't having a great time with this. The other person, Ron Fletcher. Now I couldn't find a picture of Ron. Yeah. So Ron Fletcher, unfortunately, also went down the same rabbit hole as Richard Dale. And both of these men later said that they sought psychiatric help because the search for the golden Hare had driven them potty. And Ron Fletcher, what did he do? He became convinced that Williams was writing up his ideas and his clues onto a typewriter. But then when he turned on the telly or the radio, they appeared to be addressing him directly, as if Williams had told the newsreader or the radio presenter what other clues to plant into Fletcher's mind, if that makes sense. And he thought, well, how is Williams doing this? How is Williams contacting me directly? There's hardly any time gap going on here. He's listening to the beats of my fingers on the typewriter. He's bugged to the typewriter, and he's able to respond directly. He's got a direct line to the BBC and all the rest of it. So he's probably going down that psychotic rabbit hole. And also, like Dale, he rationalised in some way that it couldn't possibly be just Williams who had orchestrated this, but instead of Agatha Christie, for him it was the Queen. It had to be the Queen who had created this whole masquerade. Now, as to the clues themselves, as to how the thing works, as I said, the thing for Williams was that he wasn't great with language. He really struggled with words, and he didn't want to make any cock-ups. Basically, the clues had to be within the art. So we can't see very easily, but there are some red letters around the border, and they form an anagram of what? Frog. They form an anagram of frog, which is a red herring. But if you look carefully, like at the letter O up here, it's got these two little barbs in it. Now there are 5 letters with barbs. So there's a letter N here, there's a letter E somewhere with a barb, there's a barbed T, a barbed O, and a barbed S. It's an anagram of stone. It's an anagram of stone. Okay, so barbed letters around the edge. That's the red herring as well. So he planted red herrings throughout the book. Another way of just sending people off on wild goose chases. So, how do you do it? How do you solve it? This is written in the beginning, right at the beginning of the book. He writes this line to solve the hidden riddle, use your eyes. Okay? So, when you know, as Bamber Gascoigne did, when you know it, it still doesn't quite act together. So, the idea is that you can, through some clues somehow, you must have worked out that if you trace the eye of the person or the creature and trace that with a ruler through the longest, what I've read is meant to be the longest left limb or left arm, through the longest digit of the left limb, then that points to the right letter. Why the boy's eyes lines are crossed through his hands, I don't know. I'm not really, and that seems to be that's the hare's right limb. I mean, it's our left maybe, but that's the right hand. I can't figure it out. But fuck it. So, but anyway, but the idea is that on every page there's a word. It's an anagram, and on this page the word is buried. If you do it for every page, every piece of art in the book, it forms the sentence: Catherine's long finger overshadows earth, buried yellow amulet, midday points the hour in the light of equinoctial look hue, which is hinting at the cross, that you need to go there on one of the 2 equinoxes during the year and follow the shadow, and that's where it's buried. Now, what he also did was, there's an acrostic, which I've made easy for you because I've highlighted the first letter of each. So within this, to tell you exactly where it is, there's an acrostic which, if you separate all those letters out, beautifully creates the sentence, Clefos by Amphilope. He was dyslexic, and so we need to just ignore some of those rogue letters in there. That's what we meant to say. So that took a couple of astrophysicists. To be fair, it was 2 husband and wife teams who worked together on this from Sheffield, who were able to unscramble all of the clues and get it right down to the very last detail. But there's a snag in the story. So Williams, on the 19th of February, receives the letter that he's been waiting for now for 2.5 years. The letter is dated 5th of February, so whoever wrote the letter spent a couple of weeks not being bothered to post it. But it got to Williams, and Williams reads it and he gets excited. He sees a picture of the cross, and it's alluding to Ampthill Park. Someone has figured it out, and it comes with a phone number. So he calls the phone number, and a chap called Ken Thomas answers. Kit Williams says it's Kit Williams. I think you've got it right, I think you've got it. And the chap sounds bored, listless, and says, oh, okay, great. And William says, can you tell me how you did it? And he said, oh, I looked at some of the pictures and some of their hairs and, it's just sort of figured it out. And Williams went, well, can you give me some more detail? And the guy was very vague about it. And I thought, he hasn't figured out any of the clues. He's got it by look or something. And William starts to feel deflated, but he's let the cat out of the bag now. It's too late. And the guy says, well, look, I've started digging around the cross, but I can't find anything. What do you suggest? And William says, well, just keep digging, where you've sort of said in the letter. And the guy says, well, I'm a bit worried about it because the first night that I went digging, I already saw there was another hole there. I think someone else, is going to beat me to it. So Williams doesn't say any more, but Ken Thomas goes off, and for the next 3 nights, he digs with his friend around the cross. They find nothing. And there is that original first pile of soil there that arrived the day before they started digging. Finally, in desperation, what they do is they go to the cross during the day, they dress as workmen, they put a giant plastic fence around it and pretend that they're doing work on it, and they dig up the whole fucking ground. And just about after they've dug up the whole lot, Ken Thomas goes over to that first pile of soil that was there before they arrived, and he has a bit of a look around in that, and there is the casket. And he's found the casket. Who dug that hole? It was the husband and wife teams of the Rousseaus and Barkers who had dug that hole the day before, and they had solved every single puzzle right down to the detail. And they'd gone there at night and they dug in the right spot, but because it was dark and because the casket was a similar colour to the soil, they missed it. They turned over the soil and they missed it. And Ken Thomas took the prize. Who was Ken Thomas? Here he is receiving the casket from Kit Williams for a press photo. He didn't actually look like that in real life. He turned up in heavy disguise, right? So he'd grown a bit of a beard. He had a pipe which he didn't smoke, a hat pulled down over his face, glasses, and this big coat. And everybody smelt a rat, and they were right. It was 6 months later that the Sunday Times revealed what had happened, or an allegation as to what had happened. So Ken Thomas, better known as Dugald Thompson, his best mate happened to live with Kit Williams' ex-girlfriend. Kit Williams' ex-girlfriend, I said the villain of the piece, Kit Williams' ex-girlfriend, and she was a vegetarian as well, who'd have thought that? So Kit Williams' ex-girlfriend had said to her new partner, no, Kit never told me where the thing was buried, but he did go to Anfield Park an awful lot and was sniffing around that cross for Catherine and Aragon. So Williams was heartbroken by this, never really recovered, and he sort of became a recluse and only sold his art to friends and private collectors. There'd been so much publicity around this as well. He was a publicity-shy individual in the first place. But the story doesn't end. The story doesn't end there. Now it takes some kind of stranger turns. So, because of the phenomenal success of Masquerade, there were going to be copycats. Cream Egg got in on the action, and exactly the same. They could have been done for plagiarism. So they created the Cream Egg mystery with artwork and riddles inside, which looks a bit like Kit Williams' own handiwork. And they went and buried 12 golden cream eggs around the country. What did people do? They went off with their spades and they started digging up the UK again. After a while, after 11 of the eggs were found, they said, look, we can't do this anymore. They were getting into too much trouble. Again with the National Trust and private landowners. So one of those eggs is still out there if you want to go look for it. After this came the Piper of Dreams, whoever made this, they couldn't afford to get someone as prestigious as Bavard, so they got Roddle and Emu to to oversee the burial of a golden flute valued at £20,000. Now this one really backfired because they printed, I don't know, 100,000 copies of the Piper of Dreams, and the golden flute was found within 2.5 weeks. And after that time, sales of the book really dropped off. So, what did Dugald Thompson do with the golden hare? He decided to set up a business making computer games, something he'd never done before. I mean, he was a sort of Arthur Daly kind of character, right, Dugald Thompson. So he sets up Haresoft Limited in 1984 and releases a game called Hare Prelude for every computer that's out at the time, so Commodore, Dragons, the Spectrum, Spectrum, etc. And the prize, you guessed it, is the golden hare. So, what was the game like? Well, according to Stuart Ashen, at the Norwich Gaming Festival last year, it was the worst computer game that was ever devised. This is what the graphics look like. So they spent a lot of time on that. And here's a little 30-second extract from Stuart's talk, if that's going to work. Is that going to work?
There's the hare.
Oh, yeah.
The count has begun. Good. Let's go somewhere else. Help is here. Now that's what we call a lie, because there's nothing here whatsoever. Search from coast to coast. So you're getting the idea, yeah? This is all there is. It's just a load of screens with some stuff on.
So that's what the game was. There wasn't anything you could do, there was no interactivity, it was just a series of words and some different images and then a hare bouncing along the bottom. The game cost £10. The book at the time cost £3.50. The game, that was equivalent of about £65 of today's money to buy that cassette. It was panned by the reviewers, and then Dugald Thompson had the audacity to say to the public, oh, if you actually want to find the hare, you need to buy Hare Finale, because you need both cassettes, you need both games to actually solve the puzzles. So that would have been £130 that you would have spent just for the privilege of actually looking for the thing. Now people like Stuart scrutinised the games and just said it's utterly unintelligible. Nobody would have been able to figure this out. This game absolutely died a death. Nobody bought it, nobody reviewed it, and the company went into liquidation. The only difference, by the way, between Hare Finale and Prelude is spiders instead of hares. That was the only difference, right? So it goes into liquidation, and the hare is put up for auction. Estimated selling price £3,000. So Kit Williams wants it back, and he's prepared to spend £8,500 to get his golden hare back. It sells for £32 to an anonymous buyer from the Middle East, and disappears out of the country, never to be seen again. Almost never to be seen again. Because 30 years later, Van der Gascoigne and Kit Williams were reunited with the hare after the 30th anniversary of the release of the book, where the owner allowed for it to be returned to the UK for a handful of days, where it was put on display in the V&A. And it was a very tearful moment, particularly for Williams. And the hare is now back with its owner, and it's been reported that the person who bought it the guy who bought it allows his wife, or his wife chooses to wear it on Christmas Day at the dinner table, and that's it. Then it goes back in the box and it's for the rest of the year. So it's tragic, but I think the hare's journey is not at an end. Be interesting to see if the hare continues to kind of move around the world. So, in many ways, this is quite a sad story because it pretty much broke Williams, and it should have been the Barkers and the Russos who should have got the golden hare. They put in that hard work, they solved the puzzles. But there's a curious thing about this, and that is that what Williams had created was an X marks the spot treasure map, disguised in part as a book of riddles. And even though this is a big part of our Western culture, our Western literature and cinema, the truth is that there have not been any recorded examples in history of any genuine pirate maps. They didn't exist. The X marks the spot pirate map, as far as we know, never existed, merely in our fantasy. And yet as kids, we read Treasure Island. As adults, we might have continued romanticising this whole thing through films like Pirates of the Caribbean. And I think that even though it is in many ways a tragedy what happened to the Hare in this story, we have to remember that what Williams did was he invoked the spirit of an X marks the spot style treasure hunt. And I think in many ways it was actually perhaps fitting that the golden hare was found by good old-fashioned piratical skullduggery. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Fabulous final Bavard. Now, do we have any questions for David? Because I know, just before I run to the questions, I must just say, David, that I didn't know you were going to give that talk, and I loved it. But I was one of the Masquerade. I wasn't a Masquerader, but I certainly have the book. And I was certainly kind of obsessed for a few months in trying to find it. And I think didn't every now and again the media, so the BBC News, would put out some kind of
clues. Yeah, he gave. There were two separate occasions he gave clues in the press, which I think helped Barkers and the Russos, but nobody else. No, I should have said I brought a copy. If you want to come and have a look at it and enjoy the art, you can get them from Amazon for about a penny. Not actually quite Masquerade these days.
Is there any other Masquerade? Oh yeah, see.
Was there not a sequel by Kit Williams where the objective was to find out the title of the book?
Sorry, say that again.
Was there not a sequel by Kit Williams where the objective was to find out the title of the book?
I don't know about that. If there is,
It had bees on the front cover as well.
Okay, I will look into that. I've never heard of it. That's okay. I'll come back next year. I'll give it a
one on bees. Any other questions? But yes, yeah.
What we'd like to know is what happened to the cowpat?
That's rhetorical, isn't it? It's a rhetorical question.
You're a salesman!
Armchair sleuth.
Have you ever seen this clock? Kit Williams did a clock that has golden hair on, and on the hour it goes crazy and everything moves around, and big gold balls come around.
Was that in the BBC documentary? Is that where you've seen it?
It's in the Regent's Arcade in Cheltenham.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
No, obviously he lives close there, doesn't he? I haven't.
If you're ever in that part of the world, it's worth going to see. It's very big and it's fantastic. The day that it opened, there was a riot because so many people were cramming in to go and see it.
Right. I think I remember seeing it in the BBC. There's a BBC documentary, 30-year anniversary of the book, and I'm pretty sure that was included. And so I haven't seen it in the flesh, so to speak.
Yeah.
So no, okay. Next time
You have to make sure you go on the hour.
Okay.
Thank you, Rory. Any final questions for David? No? Sorry. There's a question. Final question here, then we'll.
It's slightly off topic, but there's a very similar thing in the Rocky Mountains. This guy called Fen, I believe his name is, and he buried some treasure. And I think it's back in the early 2000s. I was just curious if you've ever heard of that. There's been several people who's kind of famous that died looking for the Rocky Mountains. And similar things, he used clues. And I saw it on Vice and YouTube. I was just curious if you ever heard of that.
I haven't heard of that. Is that quite recent then?
It was in the last 20 years. Okay, but yeah, it's just something that, when, as you were saying it, I've never heard this story. I was like, I know this story, but for different reasons. So,
No,
I know it's like,
that sounds like it's worth
Check it out.
exploring. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Well, can we please thank David Bramwell?